Okay, I got Joe safely behind the glass. Can take the mask off. Um, Mask is, I don't know if it's really necessary, but it might save somebody's life, so I do my best to minimize the spread of the germs. But anyway, the last video ended on kind of a sour note where we were talking about all the negativity, and I've noticed in the last couple of years, and what do we do about it? What do we do about these politicians? It's like everybody blames everything on the politicians. And I used to be a politician many years ago now. I was a township supervisor in 1980 in East Bay Township, and it was a pretty tumultuous time. Right after I got elected, we had a big groundwater contamination, and we had kind of what you might call a little tax revolt where I inadvertently filled up the township hall to the extent that we had to adjourn the meeting and move over to the elementary school across the street, across from a 3-mile road, across the township hall. I filled it up. I think we had about 150 or 200 people. It was all a big misunderstanding, but it was pretty exciting for a while. Anyway, people can be easily misled, and in many ways they want to be misled because they feel better when their juices are flowing, and that's what we're up against now. Marketing requires clickbait and headlines that get people excited, and how do you break that down? How do we get the politicians under control? Because they're making money with all of these insults and encouraging others to be insulting as well. And I would say just don't go for it. Don't go for the insults. Hang on a second. People are insulting each other, and it feeds off of each other, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. They get sensationalism. Obviously, President Trump has had his share of sensational moments and gotten a lot of free publicity for it, but it goes back to most of my adult life. People that create controversy get the publicity. I remember Joe Biden was the chairman of this committee when Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill were going after each other, and it was tremendous publicity for the new Senator Biden to pit these two black people against each other on public television. And I remember Clarence Thomas refused to answer some of the questions because he says he's not going to participate in this high-tech lynching. And that term, I think it entered our vocabulary, but it needs to come back because what we're really experiencing here are high-tech lynchings. And the public is demanding it, and they view their various channels. There's one for the Democrat, or there's a few for Democrats. There's more than one for the Republicans as well. But it's all some variation on high-tech lynching. And in a democracy, it doesn't have to be on TV. It can be at the dinner table where people are talking and suddenly somebody insults somebody because of their beliefs. And I'm here to tell you that everybody has their own beliefs, and they got good reasons for what they believe. They may not be able to explain it. They may not be able to justify it. Most of the time, they just want to stand up. Not stand up, but not stand out. Most of the time, they're just going to be quiet. And that's poison for the democracy because we need to be talking about these issues. Well, anyway, when someone starts insulting our president or a former president, I would like to see people be somewhat resistant and not encourage conflict, but just say, well, that's your opinion, and a lot of people have opinions, and But get into the nitty-gritties of each of the issues. Don't just fall for this who do you line up with kind of thing. Because it's not the leaders that are leading us. It's the public opinion is leading the country. I've studied some of the history of different events, and when the Civil War came up, they had telegraph shooting newspaper clippings back and forth between the North and South, and newspapers made them a lot of money by promoting that conflict. We saw it again in World War I, when Woodrow Wilson was trying to keep us out of the war, but there were a lot of people in Germany, in England, and they took sides in the U.S., trying to promote and insult and get publicity for their opinion. And Woodrow Wilson wasn't strong enough to really stand up and say, no, we're not going to go to war, and we're going to convene a peace conference, and we're going to encourage people to talk this out. He wanted to do it, he just didn't know how. And he had people that were part of his administration and friends that were taking sides instead of trying to find solutions. And right now we're seeing this same kind of dynamic play out in China, where you have a bunch of different sides in China. And I did spend, I started this subject, I spent 12 years as township supervisor. And after the first year, I had a lot of people really excited, and things were not going well. We'd had a big groundwater contamination and that tax issue. I was ready to leave, but I always respected everybody that I could. I didn't put people down, and I didn't attack back. And eventually people that I thought were enemies turned out to be friends. And anybody that's been in politics over a period of time realizes that your friends aren't always your friends, and your enemies aren't always your enemies. And if you treat everybody with respect, because as a citizen, all of our votes are equal, pretty soon you learn to communicate, and you can work things out between you. And I did last 12 years in that position, even though after the first year, it was doubtful whether I even wanted to be there, and likewise, it was questionable whether the people wanted me to be there. But I wasn't going to quit on them, so it did eventually go on for 12 years. And with China, again, I got another 13 years of teaching English in China and learning about that country. One thing that I've learned over the years is that our relationship with China goes back 200-300 years. We're Christian missionaries. We're going into China. And at the turn of the century, we had, everybody knows about communists versus capitalists, but they had a lot more dynamic things going on with Europe and the U.S. and capitalists, people that were friendly with Russia, people that were friendly with Europeans, and America was just trying to stay in the middle and try to stabilize China. So we've got a history of trying to stabilize China. A lot of people don't know this, but in the 1920s, during a turbulent part of China's history, when they were just really getting into the Civil War kinds of things that were happening before Japan really attacked them, there were 50,000 missionaries in China. A lot of them were Americans. And there were a lot of Christians in China. And actually, we ended up, as a country, siding with the nationalist Chinese, call it the Kuomintang, Chiang Kai-shek. He married a Christian woman, and and the U.S. was supportive of that Christian element. Uh, we probably got a little too involved in the local politics of China, but that's another subject. We won't deal with that. I came from Oakland University, and I went to China in the year 2000 as part of a group that was teaching English to English teachers in China. As it turns out, my university, Oakland University, had a program called the Summer Institute, and it was created in 86, something like that. And the Guizhou province, provincial government, the poorest province in China, except for Tibet, they didn't have any English teachers, and Mao Zedong, in the years prior to that, had persecuted English teachers. You weren't allowed to teach English. So they were starting from scratch in Guizhou province, trying to get English going so that the people could advance. That was a key for economic development, was for people to learn English. So I volunteered along with probably 10 or 12 other people and got involved in this program. It had been going on for 13 years. And I knew about it. My sister was a member of the faculty at Oakland University, so I went there. And I had the time of my life. I spent 7 weeks in China. 4 weeks was teaching English to largely middle-aged people who were they were already English teachers, but they never talked to English people. They listened to Voice of America and the BBC, and they learned their English from listening to the radio. But they didn't have conversations. Nobody to talk to. So we did a good service, and I went back again in 2002, and they invited me to come and teach. Of course, I was competing in a real estate business. I wasn't that successful. A lot of people made money, but that's another subject. I went to China in 2003 to teach English, and I stayed there for more than 3 years. I always came back during the summertime and appraised real estate, but I had friends that were taking care of the business, and they didn't necessarily need me. So I got 3 years teaching English. One year was at a university, and then I went back and forth. But it was really important because we had a history of cooperating with China long before the communists were there. The missionaries from 200-300 years ago were there. When I was in Guizhou province, I went to a Catholic church just for a visit, but that church had been there since the middle 1800s. And so the Western presence, the Christian presence, has been in China for a lot of years. And all the Christians were not persecuted over those hundreds of years. And there is a good support for Christianity in China. And it's not evangelicals, it's just people that believe that. So anyway, I helped them with their English, and I got a tremendous benefit from that. And that ended up stretching out for 13 years. But I always thought I having earned an MBA and was certified appraiser, that wouldn't have any trouble making a living. But I kind of settled down in China, and I still came back to the U.S. every summer, but I had a nice, comfortable existence in China. I got the computer going here. Let me tell you how it ended. I was when the pandemic hit and festivities started to take place, where U.S. and China were really criticizing each other, I was told there's a pandemic in China and you need to come home. And the media had already been kicked out. This was January of 2020, and I thought it's really important that somebody knows what's going on in China, and we don't have any media that's permitted to report from China. So that was a big problem. So anyway, I guess I should mention my blog now. Vlog, I don't know, video log. This is a website, and I had to leave China. I had to leave my bicycle, all my tools, and all my equipment. It was a fairly good middle-class life there. I had children coming over. I'm talking about in 2020. After the pandemic hit, I still had students coming to my house to learn English, and it was just friends that wanted to learn English. And that's what happened. But when they told me I had to leave, that was it. I had to leave. And let me see if I can make this screen a little bit bigger. I think the control mouse key will do that. Okay. And we had jazz bars, and Guiyang was just a cool place. I had a full, I did fall in with a bunch of martial arts guys, and they had to leave. They left me some of their equipment. These are the knives. These are the staffs, and I had to sell my microwave and all of these things that coffee grinders, everything had to sell. And of course, with the pandemic, nobody's going to go to a foreigner's house, because the foreigners are the ones that had the virus. China had controlled their virus by that point. So anyway, I made a log of what was happening in China, and it can all be found at www.tourguizhou.com. That's www.tour Guizhou, Guizhou.com. And I've got a dozen years of writing down stuff. Like in April and May, we didn't have an effective testing program, but I could get a test for about $15, and anybody could. You could just walk in the hospital and bang, they take your blood and you get your test results. A day later, they give you your test results. So anyway, I wrote everything down, and even on the internet, I saw this New Zealand Prime Minister. That was very cool. I'm looking at an image of the Prime Minister of New Zealand. China wasn't the only one that locked down. As an authoritarian country, we all want to say, well, the Chinese can do that because they're authoritarians, or they're totalitarians, or something like that. But Australia locked down, New Zealand locked down, and they talked about what they needed to do, and they realized that they had to restrict travel inside their own countries so that the virus didn't get around and infect everybody. And in this case, this picture of the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, looks up when the earthquake struck during a live television interview in Wilmington, New Zealand on Monday. So she's explaining to the public how you're supposed to act during the pandemic and why we're doing what we're doing. And she got an earthquake hit, And she just sat there and smiled and kind of looked up and then went back to being the leader that she was. So it's stuff like that. I concluded that there are times when I wish she was on our team in the USA because she was able to rally the people. And ultimately, the leaders are important, but the public needs to want to be led. They need to come together and support their government and elect other people if they don't like it. If they don't like what the government's doing, every 4 years we have an election for president, and every couple of years you have elections for local government. So that's the way to deal with this. Here's a headline. It's the closest thing to won't eat snakes and bats. Because on May 20th, I was just fed up with all the media coverage. China had said that this virus came from snakes and bats, and for a while there they were saying it's not transmissible. Even the WHO, not transmissible. But I knew that from my experience in the SARS epidemic that this was the real thing. It was very serious, very deadly, and I watched that on TV a lot. So anyway, I documented a lot of these things that happened in China because there was no media. And the newspapers or videos, they have such a short attention span. If they don't give their message to you in 2 or 3 minutes, then that's it. They're on to the next subject. So this is a website about China and my life in China, and it's basically a 12-year effort of documenting what I was experiencing as a foreigner in China. And I liked this little video with a cat, and it's a picture. I think it's photoshopped, where the cat and the little kid are looking out, and they don't know what they're looking out for, but they know they have to look out. And here's another video. These are all under the headline, tourguizhou.com, not gone and memories remain. So if you do a search of tourguizhou.com and go into the search engine there, you can find this page. And this page has some moments where you were locked down and you couldn't get out. You could go out for food every 2 days. And I took a picture of a couple in a deserted subway where there were just 2 people sitting together. They had both cooperated to get out and meet with each other during the pandemic. I think these were people that were in love. And they didn't know that it was airborne virus. You can still get virus by touching things, but this is, I've got a picture of an elevator where they have a bunch of toothpicks, and instead of pushing the elevator button, you picked up a toothpick, push the button with a toothpick, and then drop the toothpick in a paper cup. So anyway, I have a lot of things that I've documented, things, interesting things. Had the police come and bring me a mask because I called them up and said, hey, I can't go out, I don't have a mask. And so we had 3 policemen come over, and they brought me a mask. So that was me all dressed up to go out. I guess a lot. If we do the blog, you're not going to be able to. No, what is it? What do they call it? Podcast, right? If we do a podcast, you're not going to be able to see this on the podcast, but you can find it. tourguizhou.com page 2. Anyway, I've got a lot of stuff here that I think people might be interested in. So I've covered most of what I wanted to cover. I've recently been reading a book about an audible book where you have to listen, and you can go about your business and listen, about the Sung sisters. And the thing, there were 3 women that were educated in the U.S. Their father had come to the U.S. in the 1800s and went back to China. And he had 6 children, but the daughters were just famous. They had been educated in the U.S., and they came back and married prominent people who played a huge role in the history of China in the 20th century. So there's a lot of things about Chinese history that go right along with American history, and I've really been hoping that we can get back together with China, and the U.S. has got to get its house in order. There's nothing we can do about China except set a good example. And the one thing I wanted to do when I was in politics was set a good example for the future. And I think East Bay Township has done a nice job, and I feel like I've contributed to that. And the best thing you can do for international relations is do a good job with your own government, and other governments can try to imitate you. And I think I probably should wrap things up there. But you're not going to pressure any other governments to do what we tell them to do. That's not going to happen. People are nationalistic. If they figure out for themselves if they want to be like the U.S., they can do that. But as far as pressuring other countries, that's pretty hard to do. You can't get them to share your values if you're insulting them. And right now in the U.S., we're insulting each other, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. And that's at a time when we really need to be working on some problems. So I'm going to leave it there, and we'll start up again with the new Jack's Tea Party, episode 4 will be next.